Hey there, friend. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Well, this week and next, we're going to be studying Psalm 139. Now, today we're just going to look at verses 1 and 2, but this is an important psalm, which a lot of it you're going to recognize. You're going to recognize some of these verses because they've kind of entered into the common Christian consciousness, at least in our day. They have. Some of this, one of the sections in this psalm deals with God's sovereignty over our creation as humans. And so these verses have become part of the mainstay of the Right to Life movement, which, well, they should, because, this talks about God's sovereignty over life and man bearing his image. So we'll talk about that when we get there. That'll be next week. This psalm is 24 verses long. We're going to divide it in half. We're going to do 12 verses this week, 12 verses next week. And it's in 4 sections. So each section's 6 verses long. The first one is all about God's knowledge. The second section is about this wonderful journey that David takes. And he takes us on a little trip with him on this journey. The third section is about God's sovereignty over our creation. And then finally he wraps it up by making this prayer for deliverance from wickedness, the wickedness in others and the wickedness within us. So he makes that prayer and that request there at the end and kind of ties everything together because he comes back to, in the last verse, the knowledge of God. So that's where we begin and that's where we're going to end. So let's begin that first section then, here in verses 1 and 2, and allow me to read those for you. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my downsitting and my uprising. Thou understandest my thought afar off. Now, I just want to go ahead and keep reading because he continues to talk about all that God knows. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow as we hit verses 3 and 4. But today, verses 1 and 2, notice verse 1. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. The word me there is not in the Hebrew. It's understood that that's what God knows. But I translated it this way, and I like it. I like this particular translation of mine. O Lord, you have searched me, and you know. You know. So it's not that he has to know something specific. He knows all of it. You know. And isn't it what a marvelous thought it is to think that even though he knows, like he knows everything, even though he knows, he's still merciful. He's still gracious to us. He still loves us. He shouldn't, because he knows. You've searched me, and you know. You know all about it. You know the good stuff and the bad stuff, and oh, wait, there is no really good stuff. It's all bad stuff. And because I'm a sinner, and I'm corrupt, and there's none that does good, no, not one. And so God knows, and still yet he loves. Verse 2 sort of unpacks this idea of God knows. He knows all things. Well, like what? Well, you know when I sit down, you know when I get up. So God knows that too. And, that's kind of a throwaway for us, isn't it? We sit down, we rise up. How many times a day? How many times a day you sit down in a chair and get up out of a chair? Sit down on a couch and get up out of a couch? Sit down in your car and then get out of your car? How often does that happen? So many times. God knows. He knows every one of them. You understand my thoughts afar off. And, of course, God does, because he knows. And so if he understands my thoughts afar off, well, David tells us something about his thoughts. If you look down there in verse 7, one of the things that David thinks is, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? God knows that. And even though he knows that, he does not abandon us to that. He might let us run that way for a little while, but it's only to teach us that we can't get away. And of course, I don't want to spoil what's going to happen because David takes us on this journey beginning there in 7 through 12, and I don't want to ruin that for us. But God knows. He knows all things. And so this little section right here is all about his wonderful knowledge. You know my downsitting. You know my uprising. You understand my thoughts afar off. Whether near or far, God knows. And that's a wonderful thought, isn't it? He knows. And sometimes it's a horrible thought for us, but God knows. He knows all of it. Join me tomorrow. We're going to look at verses 3 and 4 here on Daily Dose Radio.